Blair, in our industry, we do you reckon we focus enough on the impacts we have as an industry on climate change?
Do we focus enough on climate change? No, we don't focus enough on climate change. I do think there is enough focus on environmental impacts
Yep.
as a more broader question, and sustainability has been a growing concern in construction for almost a decade.
Because funnily enough, we do use the most unsustainable product on planet Earth, being concrete,
Correct. Yeah.
and we use a ton of it.
We use a lot of concrete.
Yep.
But there's not a lot of focus on emissions itself, which is the key driver, or one of the key drivers of climate change. So we've got this massive, as an industry, a massive blind spot where we're not reporting, we're not recording, we're not doing much at all to alleviate the amount of emissions that are caused by construction. The focus is on other areas of environmental sustainability, like damage to waterways, which again are important issues. But landfill diversion is one of the key, most common areas that is measured in all of your tenders, in all of the contracts. Landfill diversion is the one that typically everyone wants to know your stats on. And I just think that focusing on that in isolation is driving some pretty bad behaviours.
Like what?
Like transporting waste from Wellington to Auckland so that it can be processed to drive a higher diversion number.
Okay. Right.
Pretty bad.
That's pretty bad. That's really bad.
That's
And
not,
the amount of
that's
emissions.
not a single case. That's a fairly common.
Okay.
It's a fairly common activity, fairly common practice. We have one Green Star waste operator in New Zealand, in Auckland.
In New Zealand or in Auckland?
In New Zealand.
In New Zealand, that is in Auckland.
Their facility is in Auckland. Anyone who knows the waste industry knows who I'm talking about. They do good work. They do a great job of processing waste, but I think even they would admit that they were never intending to take material from across the country so that landfill diversion stats across the country could be driven up.
Man, that's pretty piss poor, eh?
Yeah. I know some of the guys there, and they truly do believe in what they're doing, diverting as much waste from landfill. But yeah, we need to come up with other strategies that work outside of Auckland without having an impact on emissions.
So what's take it one step higher? What's New Zealand's goal for carbon neutral? I think it's by 2050. 20.
I think it's cut it by half by 2050
and an interim measure by 2030.
Yeah, 2030.
We're going 50%
reduction.
Reduction. Yeah,
I
that's
would
right.
argue that it's very, very likely that the construction industry has actually increased its emissions and is on a trajectory to continue to keep increasing its emissions.
So the New Zealand construction industry kind of forms part of New Zealand. So
it does.
Those rules or those goals will have to cascade down to us. Okay, this was really interesting for me, right?
Yeah. So a lot of outside of Green Star, which is an accreditation, right? Outside of Green Star, the strategies for landfill diversion are some fairly ethically driven principles. How do I want to? One of the strategies, I'll give an example because it'll display it better than I can describe. One of the strategies is to take building components, building elements from deconstruction and taking them over to the Pacific Islands so that they can rebuild structures, right?
Okay.
which
Demolish products.
demolished products, salvaged products that wouldn't necessarily get past engineering requirements here, wouldn't get certified, but are perfectly able to construct structures in the Pacific. Now that's a good thing. We can all recognize that as a good thing, but we also need to understand that there's a fair amount of transport required to do that good thing, and that transport is contributing to our
Emissions.
We need to have a bit more think about what environmental sustainability really means to the construction industry.
Right now, it means not a lot.
Right now,
Not many people are focused on it.
Don't damage the environment around you
Yeah.
under the Resource Management Act.
Yeah, make sure you have a good established ESCP in place.
Yeah.
Put your buns in place.
And then
Don't let
noise control,
Yeah.
dust control,
vibration control. Yeah, all of that.
and all that stuff, good stuff, solid stuff, and then dealing with existing structures on site, divert it from the landfill.
Yep.
And that's it.
So, how many construction companies in New Zealand do you reckon have a net carbon neutral goal?
How many companies?
Construction companies.
I'm not aware of any.
Ouch. Do you know what the funny thing is? Formula One
Have. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Formula
I'm not
One.
aware.
has a net carbon neutral goal by 2030.
Yeah.
And mate, they fly
I know.
cars from
I know. I'm a
country to country. Yeah?
Big, yeah. I'm
They-
a big fan of the papaya team.
Oh, yeah. Are you,
Yeah.
are you a big McLaren fan, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me it's because of Oscar Piastri.
It wasn't originally, but it will
Yeah.
be.
It will be because
Will
of
be
Oscar
if he
Piastri.
wins.
Oh.
No,
Lando? Are you a big Lando fan?
I don't mind which driver. I started in the Hakkinen period, so
Oh, I started in the Hakkinen period too.
I'm old school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like my flying fins,
Yeah.
which neither of them are.
Kimi Räikkönen, mate.
What a legend.
what a fucking legend. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're digressing a bit there. We're talking about Formula One.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, Formula One can have a target
Exactly.
and make steps to get there, and yet the construction industry in New Zealand has no goals. We're one of the few companies that I'm aware of that's even tracking our carbon expenditure.
Oh yeah. Tell me a little bit more about how you're tracking your carbon expenditure.
So we we have our own workshop. Most demolition companies have their own workshop, so we have a little bit of ability to check the exhaust and the emissions coming from the exhaust, and then we sort of model that out over the usage by kilometre of the truck, and we obviously have GPS tracking of the truck, so we know how often they're travelling and what gear they're travelling. So it is a bit of modelling guesswork. It's not a perfect track
Calc.
exactly, but it's something we can produce. We can produce a number for you of our carbon expenditure for a project.
What are you doing with that information that you
Nothing
gather?
at the moment because no one wants it.
How do you?
It's purely an internal thing to try and reduce our carbon emissions.
Wait,
But
I'm
we
stoked you're
haven't-
focusing on it, but
we
I just want to
haven't-
dig in a little bit more.
We
right?
haven't set a target as such.
Forget
We-
about anybody wanting it. Yep. So you are collecting that data for a purpose. How do
Yeah,
you
so-
intend on using that data to reduce your carbon emission?
To reduce, it's really just used as comparison. So we see how we've managed one job using a certain resources, plant, trucks, excavators, and then compare the performance or the carbon expenditure on a similar project where we've used a different approach. And it is purely an internal thing. It's part of our continual improvement with ISO.
Here's an idea. When you
ISO.
put forward your next tender, you can now model using your previous data. You can now model out and go, expected carbon emission on that project is X.
I could do, but as we talked about earlier, it would only be worth 0.001% of my score.
That comes back to the procurement model. Okay, everything comes back to
Like
the
it's
procurement model.
it's purely for our own. We've gotten ISO 14001, which is the environmental standard accreditation. And that requires you to have continual improvement. This was one of the pet peeves that our health and safety and environmental guy has. Is
Good on him, though.
he has an environmental degree, so
Yeah. Good on him.
he selected this. He tried to find a good model and went with it. So we're tracking it. It's interesting, but we're not currently using it for anything externally.
Yeah. Nah, hope you can put that data to good use at some point, mate. But I think message to I think the key focus and summary of all of this is how do we get New Zealand construction companies focused on setting carbon neutral goals, right? Again,
it'll come in a giant wave where the core values of principles will change and their focus will switch to carbon. And then if we're not prepared for it, when that change comes, it'll be the same as when regulation changes, when acts change. And
cost of implementation will be triple.
It'll suddenly, there'll be this mad panic to try and figure out how we comply with this new request.
Yep. There's food for thought right there.